Good afternoon. I now call this meeting of the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment to order. My name is Ron Bonatouche. I'm the MLA for the Decho and Deputy Chair of the committee. Today we will receive a public briefing from the Minister of Industry, Tourism and Investment, Honourable Caroline Wawzonek, and staff on the Great Slave Lake commercial fishery. Today's public meeting is being live streamed on the Assembly's social media channels. I would like to remind all members and presenters to direct all questions and comments to myself as chair and to wait to be recognized before speaking. This ensures that we have a smooth meeting. I will now ask members to introduce themselves for the record, starting on my left.
Caitlin Cleveland, MLA Can Lake.
Katrina Knockleby, MLA for Great Slave.
Rylan Johnson, MLA for Yellowknife North.
Mr. Jacobson.
Jackie Jacobson, MLA in the Nutfoot.
Ms. Marcellos. Oh, she's not online with us. Okay. Masicho, and welcome to Minister Wawzonek. Please introduce yourself and your staff and proceed with any opening remarks and the presentation. Masi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the invitation to provide an update to committee on this important sector. To support the discussion, I do have staff here with me. In the room is Deputy Minister Pamela Strand, Joel Holder, Director of Commercial Fish, and Drew Robertson, Senior Advisor. Also virtually is Tracy St. Dennis, Assistant Deputy Minister of Economic Development. The Great Slave Lake commercial fishing sector has significant opportunity for growth, not only in the employment of new fishers and plant workers, but also in the pricing that fishers receive for their catch. Both of these opportunities are strongly linked to one another. Northwest Territories fishers who export have been operating under the Freshwater Fish Marketing Act and accepting the pricing that is offered by the Freshwater Fish Marketing Corporation. While providing advantages such as an upfront payment, we do recognize that there's significant opportunity to increase the price of fish that is sold, translating into more dollars to the fishers. We would like Northwest Territories fishers to be price setters and not simply price takers. The new Hay River fish plant is vital to getting fishers a better return on their catch, and in turn, this will hopefully attract fishers to the sector. Today's briefing will go over the activities of the Department of ITI that is done to support this sector. We will highlight key areas, including our strategic partnerships, relationships with Indigenous governments and communities around the lake, and the progress that is being made on the Hay River fish plant, which will be the single largest investment our government is making in this sector. Relationships are critical as we look to ensure that the economic development from a revitalized Great Slave Lake fishery is maximized. And today's presentation should also highlight this work. A strategic partner in the efforts is the Tucho Fishers Cooperative, the economic development arm of the Northwest Territories Fishermen's Federation. We have been working also closely with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, or DFO, who are responsible for commercial fish management in the Northwest Territories and for their small craft harvest division. Over the past year, we have been working with DFO to find a location for a new commercial harbor and associated fish collection point in the Yellowknife area. Finding a location that will suit the needs of the industry and DFO is proving challenging, but we continue to pursue and evaluate possible locations. The successful revitalization of this sector requires that we collaborate as much as possible in all aspects of the commercial fishery. We are committed to meeting regularly with various sector stakeholders in order to share information and to seek input and feedback. We would like a commercial fishery that maximizes overall benefits to the territory and that gives fishers a greater role in the sale of Northwest Territories fish, and a stronger sense of certainty for the future of their industry, as well as an economic sector that will help diversify the economy of the Northwest Territories. Today, we intend to share with you the efforts we've undertaken to promote the commercial fish sector and secure its future for years to come. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would request, if I could, to have Mr. Joel Holder do the presentation on our behalf.
I'll see, Minister. You can proceed, Mr. Holder.
Right. Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. On slide 2, you will see our table of contents outlining the areas we intend to discuss today. We'll have a brief overview of the industry, followed by ITI's revitalization strategy, the support that ITI provides to the sector, the fish processing plant in Hay River, then on to the harbor access, and we'll leave you with next steps. Slide 3. There used to be quite an established and robust fishery on Great Slave Lake, with the volume of fish caught in the winter months actually outweighing the summer catch. Over time, DFO's management of the lake became more restrictive as concerns were raised over fish stocks. This resulted in a reduction in the quota and the Freshwater Fish Marketing Corporation, or the FFMC, being established. Fish exported from Great Slave Lake must be sold through FFMC, and this is how a majority of the catch is sold. Unfortunately, current FFMC pricing only pays about $1 per pound for whitefish and about 21 cents per pound for lake trout. It's this low pricing that makes it challenging to retain fishers and gain new entrants. Historically, and even today, most commercial fishers on the lake have been Indigenous. Fishing offers a renewable economic opportunity, while at the same time provides a source of local, nutritious food and contributes considerably to food security. Key to capitalizing on this economic diversification opportunity, with the promise of meaningful employment and reliable food source for Northerners and Canadians, is to encourage new entrants and try to increase the value of their catch. ITI and ENR work collaboratively on various files with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Slide 4. And why do we do that? It's because DFO has mandated authority over the fishery, including mesh size, quotas, and zone management. DFO has divided Great Slave Lake into 6 zones to fish trout and whitefish, as each zone has individual quotas. The DFO quota is competitive based and not assigned to individual fishers. Once a zone quota is met, fishing in the zone is shut down. This emphasizes the need for a healthy fishery around the entire lake to capitalize on the full potential value of the quota in all zones. Most of the fishing takes place in zones 1E, 1 East, and 1 West. It is important for the success of the fishing industry that each zone be promoted with proper infrastructure and financial incentive programs to encourage fishers to move around and capture a higher percentage of the quota from all zones. Slide 5. The 2017 strategy for revitalizing the Great Slave Lake commercial fishery was developed collaboratively with the NWT Fishermen's Federation and identifies 7 key areas. The strategy has been a key strategic driver in how the government of the Northwest Territories has been carrying out work in areas that improve the fishing sector, including the decision to pursue a CFIA-approved fish processing plant project. Since the strategy's approval, ITI, along with our partners, have been working to address these key 7 areas. 1, address value in the NWT economy. And this is best done with our new fish plant being constructed in Hay River. 2, expanding NWT markets for fish products. ITI plans to develop a Buy NWT fish promotional campaign in the summer of 2023. 3 is to restart and promote the winter fisheries. ITI has piloted winter fisheries in both 2021 and 2022. 4, increased participation in the fishery. ITI has held winter and summer training programs in the communities, and we intend to hold additional training sessions again this spring. 5, access export markets. We've undertaken, with the help of a consultant, market research and working with Tucho to develop their business plan and associated marketing plan. 6, align subsidy programs to the revitalization strategy goals. And ITI currently has a freight subsidy program, and we're working with others currently to develop a fuel rebate to help address the high fuel costs right now that we're experiencing. That will be a pilot program for at least the next 2 years. And 7, empower fishers to make decisions to develop a viable fishery. The Tucho Fishers Cooperative was created, and this is open to all fishers to become members, and it's through this cooperative that fishers have a united voice in decisions affecting the industry. Slide 6. There are several ways that the fishing sector on Great Slave Lake is supported. The NWT Fishermen's Federation developed an arm's-length economic organization called the Tucho Fishers Cooperative in 2019. Any fisher in the NWT can be part of the NWT Fishers Cooperative. In early 2020, ITI signed an MOU with the Tucho Fishers Cooperative that includes a commitment to work together. ITI is working with Tucho to develop the value-added abilities of the plant. We're working together to train and increase Tucho's capacities in quality assurance, marketing, and business planning so they'll be ready to operate the fish plant once construction is finalized. We're collaboratively looking at how to attract more fishers and build relationships with Indigenous governments and strengthen the Indigenous commercial fishery. Under funding programs, ITI has supported fishers through multiple programs such as the Commercial Fishery Assistance Industry Support Program, the Northern Food Development Program, and the Support to Entrepreneurs and Economic Development Program, or SEED. These supports have allowed fishers to outfit themselves with equipment to participate in both the summer and winter fishery, help fund community domestic processing buildings for local sales, and help address food security. ITI's Commercial Fishery Assistance Industry Support Program covers shipping fees not only from Hay River to Winnipeg, but Yellowknife to Hay River too. Fishers use this spring payment to help prepare for the upcoming open water season. ITI is also collaborating with the federal government across multiple departments to identify possible funding opportunities. And we've been working with interested Indigenous governments such as Kakisa and Fort Resolution and others on their community fisheries plans. ITI partners with the Tucho Cooperative and the federally funded Marine Training Center to provide various levels of training from basic boating skills to Fishing Captain 4 level. Training is provided remotely in all communities and at the Hay River campus. ITI has also worked with the Fort Providence Dene Band for their members to participate in the commercial fishery. This support included equipment purchasing, advocating with DFO, supporting training in the community, and funding to build a mini processing plant. Next winter, Tucho will also be starting training programs for potential plant workers. The training will include food safety, hand filleting, and general safety. ITI is working with Tucho Cooperative and the DFO to look at attracting new entrants. It's through the community training programs where we hope to find the next boat captains and deckhands. The cooperative understands and supports the need to look at attracting fishers to the sector. We are making all opportunities for new entrants to be from NWT, but it may be necessary in the future to look south for some new entrants. Perhaps the largest single investment we've made into supporting the sector is the new fish processing plant in Hay River. The fish plant project will be discussed in greater detail later in this presentation, but the main goal of this plant is to get better pricing for fish. Slide 7, winter fishery. There has not been a Great Slave Lake winter fishery since 2008. Due to the limited supply in the winter months, prices paid for fish caught in winter are generally higher than prices per pound in summer fish. ITI initiated a pilot program in 2020 and again in 2021 to revive the winter fishery. Fishing occurs in February and March of each winter, and most fish shipped to the FFMC. ITI has also undertaken community training programs in communities such as Fort Providence and Fort Resolution to help increase the number of winter fishers. Other suggested areas for future government support for the winter fishery include plowing new roads or winter roads so there is easier access to the fishing grounds, heated net pulling shacks, and sleeping accommodations on the ice. Much of the assistance focuses on winter safety and helps fishers stay warmer by keeping out of the elements. Slide 8. The GNWT has been collaborating with Infrastructure Canada through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Plan, or the ICIP, to fund a portion of this project. The GNWT has successfully secured $6,654,000 in ICIP funding for this project. ITI, with assistance from the Department of Infrastructure, has contracted Arcan through a competitive design build process to construct a fish plant capable of processing and packaging up to 1.5 million pounds of fish a year. The processing line is scalable, and processing can be accommodated should production levels surpass the 1.5 million pounds. The plant also has the potential to produce secondary products, such as processing of fertilizer from the unused fish parts, roe or eggs, canning, smoking, collagen, and fish oil. The new plant will create 15 to 20 new employment opportunities in the Hay River area. With the plant paying higher returns on fish versus the low current pricing, it is hoped that more NWT residents will enter the commercial fishing sector. Slide 9. As you saw from the previous slide, construction is currently underway with a targeted completion in November of 2022 and plans to be operational for the summer fishery of 2023. The Tucho Fishers Cooperative will operate the plant. As part of revitalization work, ITI hired outside expertise to conduct market research that will allow Tucho to help develop a sales and marketing strategy for NWT fish products. We believe there exists a market outside the current fresh in-season market for both fresh and preferably frozen cold water freshwater species, and that production from Hay River can be easily absorbed into southern Canadian markets. Slide 10. DFO is the jurisdictional authority over the commercial fishery in the Northwest Territories and responsible for harbour access. Working with DFO's Small Craft Harbour Division, ITI is exploring options for collection stations in Fort Resolution and the Yellowknife areas. The need for new collection stations has been identified as part of the revitalization strategy. New transfer facilities will allow commercial fishers to drop off catch as desired and would eliminate the need for them to travel to Hay River to sell to the fish plant. A truck would accept the fish at the collection stations and drive the fish to the Hay River processing plant. These collection station locations would also provide safe and secure mooring during bad weather and during maintenance and repairs. New transfer facilities would also make it easier for fishers to sell domestically, who want to sell domestically, to sell any additional catch for processing and export. Slide 11, next steps. Similar to other initiatives with high importance and complexity, ITI understands the significant role clear and transparent communications play in the overall acceptance and engagement of interested stakeholders around the lake. Prior to COVID, ITI established a working group consisting of Indigenous governments and communities around the lake to share with them ITI's intentions and to receive feedback on community needs and the role they would like to play in this initiative. Now the focus is on re-engagement, as well as outreach to all fishers and interested stakeholders. The relationship with the Tucho remains a priority as we assist them with the next steps as we all prepare for the fish plant's opening. This also includes working with the Tucho and supporting them with their marketing and business plan initiatives. The relationship with DFO remains critical, not only from a fish management perspective, but as well as developing key infrastructure around the lake, such as new harbor sites. ITI continues to engage with other federal departments on collaborative opportunities such as new entrance programs and the possibility of additional federal funding. Finally, working with communities around the lake to attract new entrants is an immediate priority for us. All of these elements work towards the implementation of our fish strategy and the fundamental pillar of our fishers getting better pricing. By achieving our goals, we work towards a healthy and sustainable commercial fishery. Thank you.
Merci Cho for the presentation. I will now ask members if they have any questions. Ms. Cleveland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. I have a couple of questions, but I wanted to start first in regards to the Buy NWT marketing program or marketing plan. What I'm hearing from some residents is that it's not that there's no market or interest in NWT fish, that the interest is definitely already there, But where there is a challenge is that NWT fishers or even CFIA accredited exporters are unable to sell to certain buyers because of the, so many acronyms, the Freshwater Fish Marketing Act prevents them from being able to do that. And so just in acknowledgement that the demand isn't the issue and that the ability to legally sell is, how does ITI intend to facilitate the ability of NWT fishers to sell to markets in southern Canada that already are calling these people and asking to be able to purchase NWT fish? Thank you.
Let's see for that, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to suggest this go to Joel Holder, please.
Mr. Holder.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chair, under the Freshwater Fish Marketing Act, there is a requirement that if a fisher wants to sell outside of the NWT or outside their jurisdiction, that they would need to have first a CFIA approved processing facility, and also that they would have to seek authority or seek approval from the FFMC that they would get an export license to sell outside of their jurisdiction. There's anyone with the CFIA approval, that being the new plant or one of the existing facilities in the NWT, there's no limitations if you apply through the FFMC for that relief. Thanks.
Ms. Liebman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so we do, even here in Yellowknife, have CFIA accredited exporters, and they are definitely well aware of the process that they have to go through in order to seek the approvals from the FFMC to be able to do that. One of the problems is that the process for doing that is incredibly administratively burdensome. And so if, for example, a small place in BC or Alberta, for like a deli, calls and says, hey, I want to purchase a few $1,000s worth of fish, what people are doing, is like diversifying their markets and trying to sell to multiple different vendors down south to be able to grow their business, and to have to then turn around and do the huge administrative burdens for each of those delis or purchasers is you would spend your entire life doing paperwork and not fishing, or doing paperwork and not looking for new markets. And so that is the challenge that it exists today in trying to really sell fish outside of the NWT as private exporters. But my next question is in regards to those private exporters. I'm wondering how ITI plans to protect existing CFIA accredited exporters in the NWT to ensure that NWT businesses grow alongside the revitalization plan of the NWT fishing industry. Thank you.
Deputy Minister.
Or Minister.
I'll take the pass, Mr. Chair. That's okay. Yeah, thanks. So I do just want to quickly catch on the comments that Emily Cleveland was making, that the challenges that may exist under the FFMC or under the existing act. I mean, this is a federal piece of legislation, so to some degree we're caught in a process that's not entirely of our own control. That said, we do have our own Northwest Territories individual who's on the board, who's involved, and I know there is a process right now where that entity is in transition, and we're certainly, keeping tabs on what's happening. As I said, we have someone who is there on behalf of the Northwest Territories, and we're certainly watching what that evolution will look like, so that ultimately the hope would be that, yes, it would be easier for anyone who's met the two criteria that Joel mentioned to be able to sell. In the interim, perhaps, and depending on, again, I can't speak to the timing of what may or may not happen at the federal level, but in the interim, having the fish plant here who could undertake that would at least give one option, one route by which fishers would have more easily to sell through other alternatives. But that, which then leads to your next question of what we're doing for protecting the existing individuals who are CFIA approved. I mean, so there's lots of quota, so lots of catches available. There's certainly not a question of there not being enough opportunity in terms of the quota that's available. I'd love to have the problem of approaching the quota, which I don't think is a problem that we're going to reach anytime immediately. Fishers are not going to be required to sell to the plant, right? So they have certainly their own opportunity to continue to sell through other means. And, ITI also does, offer supports to the industry in general. So there's fishers who are or are not members of the TUCHO who are certainly still getting a lot of direct supports through the various fishing support programs that are available, and that will not change. So those are all, again, that's not meant to be a one-size-fits-all approach. It really is still meant to continue to support fishers, the fishing industry, and the communities, and this is just giving another opportunity, hopefully. Thanks. Thanks, Mr.
Merci, Joe. Ms. Cleveland?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for letting me entertain another question. And that kind of brings me right into my next question, which is most jurisdictions, I think all other jurisdictions, have elected to kind of pull themselves out of the Federal Act and create their own Fisheries Act. And so is the intent then of the GNWT to pull themselves out of the FFMC as well and institute their own Fisheries Act for the Northwest Territories, their own legislation, so that we're not being held back by the federal government and our NWT fishers can then sell openly to markets south of the NWT? Thank you.
Minister?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to the Deputy Minister in a moment, but just to start to set the stage for her is just that, and I can't necessarily speak to where the strategy began in 2017, but, they're waiting to see exactly where the transition goes, what that transition looks like. It may well be that it turns into an opportunity that works perfectly fine without having to develop our own legislation, but without necessarily knowing that it is a bit difficult to make the final call on that. But if I could, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to the Deputy Minister Strand to speak a little more about that. Thanks.
Deputy Minister?
Thank you. And yes, further to the Minister's comments there, we're actively supporting the transition of FFMC. As the Minister stated, we don't truly know what that looks like yet, but it is moving towards a harvesters-led co-op. I think that we are doing the work right now on all options for the future of the Northwest Territories. What's really important for us is the benefits, because we view fish very much like diamonds and minerals. To see that added value within the territory is really important. So what does that look like? We'll have to work through that. I think there's value. We are the last standing member of FFMC. We can still make our transition and still be a member of FFMC and have both options open wherever the future lies. As Joel said, we want to be price makers, and if there is an opportunity to follow FFMC or the future of FFMC and the work they do versus the marketing that'll happen from the fish plant here, I think those are all options that we'll have to weigh as we get there. So the future is uncertain, but I think what we're doing paves a path regardless. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci for that. Ms. Nalkobi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. So I'm trying to wrap my head around all the information to do with fisheries, and I know it's a big file. It's my understanding that some third-party work was done on a pre-assessment by the Marine Stewardship Council, and I'm just wondering if that pre-assessment has been shared with the fishers, and if it hasn't, why not, and can we also get a copy? Thank you.
Merci for that. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I think if I could, I'm going to suggest this go to Joel again.
Mr. Holder?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there was some work done initially on some certification. It was early days in the certification. We were just sort of testing the waters with what that might mean. What does our fishery look like, and what they might give, what sort of impression the certifier might give for our industry, and what's the current state, current status, and where there might be gaps. We did receive that document from them. At the point in time, we were saying that we were not going to pursue it any further because it's something that if we were to pursue, we'd have to talk more with the stakeholders and others about what certification might mean. There's also many certifications out there. There's Indigenous certification, there's other types, and maybe what would be best suited for the Great Slave Lake and the Northwest Territories is something that would have to be discussed further. We do have the document. It has not been shared external to GNWT or to the department. It was created for the department, but we should take that as an undertaking to share that with others.
Ms. Nockley?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I would really like to see that shared. Even if it isn't an avenue that's going to be pursued, it is an assessment and something that can just, for myself and others, give more information on an area that I'm not very knowledgeable on. So I will follow up with the Minister's office because it was a sort of commitment there to share. So my next question, I've got a lot of questions here actually. So because we've had lots of conversation around the harbor before, and it is in the one that was currently being used by fishers is in my riding, I think I'll start there for my next question. So it is my understanding that the dock at the end of Robertson Drive is not necessarily the one that will go ahead, and it's being looked at. When I look at the harbors around in the Yellowknife region, they have been terribly maintained, and DFO has kind of neglected us for years. So I guess my question there is, I'm hearing that there is no, that the one at the end of Robertson Drive is not going to be the feasible one because of work that needs to be done. However, there seems to be disparaging opinions on that, so maybe the minister can speak a little bit to whether or not that area is being looked at, and if it is being looked at, whether we're going to see it be more of a use like the wharf in Hay River, where it will be multi-use, not just fishers. Thank you.
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, just a quick note on the marine stewardship document. So I'm always more than happy to share when I can. I just, not having seen the material, that particular document, just want to look at it and make sure we're not sharing something that has some sort of proprietary issues to it or other information. I suspect at the very least it can go to MLAs, and then we'll kind of work it out from there. Now, Mr. Chair, on the second item with respect to harbors and Robertson Dock, this is one of the areas where yeah, I am getting tired of talking about COVID, but there was a bit of a delay. I mean, they couldn't get their folks up when there were travel restrictions initially. Obviously, that changed over time, but the federal government took a particularly, cautious stance on sending folks around, particularly to regions that had more vulnerable populations in them. So, all of which is to say that some of the work of identifying locations in Yellowknife with the DFO staff did take a bit of a delay, unfortunately. I have spoken with the Minister of Department of Fisheries. They're aware that this is a major issue for us. They're aware that we have this fish plant and that we really are going to need to advance that work. So I believe the last round of conversation I had was that they have that knowledge, they have that awareness. They've now got an office in Yellowknife. There's more activity here. Whether it will be the Robertson Dock or not, I can't say for sure. It certainly isn't going to be as simple and easy as picking a location as what I might have even hoped from my own Yellowknife naivete at one time. But I can say that they are active on it now, and they understand that it's a priority for us. So as I think Emily Knockley will have noticed, and yourself, Mr. Chair, the MLAs who are located along the lake, we are trying to provide regular updates to that group since they're most directly affected, and will continue to do that. Thank you.
Let's see for that, Ms. Knockley.
Thank you. I guess we're all getting 3 today, hey? So I appreciate that, because I was just going to ask to go back on the list anyway. So I'm glad that the minister has brought up sort of those of us around the lake, and I think that's one of the concerns too, is that right now when I'm listening, I see Fort Resolution, I see Yellowknife, but I don't see others, and I know there was training done around Fort Providence, and it doesn't sound like that really took, or that there's anything happening there. I know it was noted that the winter fishery was equating to the summer, but that's because the summer is dropping, not because the winter is coming up. So, there are concerns there around whether or not we're maximizing the quotas as mentioned. So what is happening to promote fishing to other areas of the NWT, not just Yellowknife, not just Hay River, places like the Chairs riding and others? I would actually like to see multiple places around that we could be doing this. So maybe I could just ask the minister to speak a little bit more to that, what's happening outside of those couple communities. Thanks.
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in a moment, I think I'll suggest we go over to Joel again. I was debating a bit whether I'd go to Deputy Minister Strand, who I know recently was in Fort Providence and had an opportunity to speak to folks there. But because there are certainly a lot of elements on the go. There's a lot of different support opportunities, both summer and winter. Yeah, I think just to make sure I don't miss any of them, I'd suggest, Mr. Chair, if I could go over to Joel, please. Thank you.
Mr. Holder?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To try to be more informative and more collaborative, we've got 4 opportunities that we're looking immediately ahead of us in the month of May and early June. The first being a meeting jointly between the Tucho and ourselves with Yellowknife fishers, just explaining to them what are the plans for Tucho from themselves, and then what does ITI bring to the table? What are the benefits that we have? What are the programs that we have? How is this all going to work? So we're hoping to have that meeting jointly with Yellowknife fishers before the end of May. The next is that we have Indigenous community meetings that we're planning on having. The minister made a commitment to communities that about a working group or the opportunity to be participant in a working group. We've had meetings with communities on the south side of the lake, but during COVID times it was difficult to get into communities, and actually, it might still be, but we're planning on doing our best and reaching out to the North Shore communities again before the end of May to ask whether or not we can come to the community to speak to them again about the ITI's plans, about the plant, about our programming, why it's important now to maybe take a closer look at commercial fishing being an opportunity for community members, given the emphasis that we have on fishing right now. So we're hoping to get out and do those communities in a number of communities across the North Shore. And then we've got Indigenous community training. So we're working with the Marine Training Institute, as well as with ECE and DFO and others, to put together a curriculum for training that can be held by a fisher on his or her boat, so that individuals in communities can get sort of a 1 week, 2 week apprenticeship to be there on the boat, to know what it's like to live the lifestyle, to pull nets, to see what it's like to be on the open water, and to see whether or not that's an employment opportunity they'd like to further pursue. So that's sort of happening in tandem. And then we would like those again before the opening season, so that we can create a list from communities that we can then share with fishers, the boat captains and others, that here's a list of individuals in these communities that have at least this entry-level training and that you can count on, or that have expressed an interest at least for the sector, and maybe give one of these individuals a call if you're looking for labor. And then finally, for the rest of everyone else, we would like to have an open house after we've completed these training opportunities, the community meetings. We'd like to have an open house, probably in Yellowknife and Tave River, just for the general public, where the public can come and talk to us, ask any questions that they might have about the sector. We can inform them about what's happening with the plant and what we're doing as a government to really, push the revitalization strategy and the number of initiatives that are in that. So it's we're really starting with yourselves here at Sketty, and then going from there. We're really putting a push on the communications. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's see for that. Ms. Knockleby will allow another question.
Sure, thank you. So, like always, everybody could always use more funding. So it is my understanding that I was glad to hear that there's a fuel subsidy coming, because I think everywhere we talk to anybody in any sort of industry, fuel is always an issue. So I'm glad to hear that. And I know that ITI has funded such items as nets and things in the past, but I guess where I'm looking to go, is there an idea or an opportunity to sort of maybe provide funding and not be so prescriptive about where it ends up, or allowing just more for fishers to build their businesses how they see fit, or where they need to use the money, versus just like, here's a pot and you have to buy X with it and prove it this way. Like I know, and I guess I'm kind of making a bit of a leap from some of our other funding that we do in other areas, where there always seems to be a lot of hoops or requirements or such built in, and maybe there is not the want to jump through those hoops. So I guess I'm just asking about the simplicity of the funding that is coming and whether or not there'll be greater funding coming other than just for nets, etc. Thank you.
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, I think Joel went over a bit of the vision of where we wanted to spend some training dollars and find a way to, encourage new applicants to come in and to do that, through a mentorship, not just kind of coming in blindly. I know as I was sitting here, Deputy Minister Strand's pulling out the book that shows all of the contribution agreements and the opportunities that may exist already, some of which are fairly flexible. Like there's a pot of money for a fisher and it can be for equipment. And they can dictate to a certain degree what they want. Beyond that, Mr. Chair, what we might be doing here is we get the working group really that we were hoping to have running a little more smoothly before COVID, is in the course of that, it's an opportunity for the fishing industry to tell us if there are things that these pots do not fund, then that would actually be helpful to know. The intent is that we are putting a lot behind the strategy. The intent, of course, is we're building a fish plant, and if there's a barrier that can be resolved, then the sooner we're aware of it, the better. Because again, there's a fair bit of funding is available, and if it can't be accessed for the right reasons, then that's a tweak that can be made. So, I appreciate the question, and as I'm saying again, I think we'll make sure and commit that we're asking that question as we're going through the engagements that Mr. Holder just went through. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Merci for that, Minister. I guess I have a question. You did mention that it was $1 per pound for a whitefish, 26 cents pound for trout. And you were also stating that with the new plant, they would get better pricing. And also at the same time, you're saying in the winter time, it's even better pricing. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on all that, and I'll see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, some of that is a function of being able to sell directly through a variety of different markets and just not having to go through FFMC, which provides a floor for pricing, but not necessarily chasing after a top level. But for the differences between the winter and summer, I'd suggest I go over back to Mr. Holder, please.
Mr. Holder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the difference between the winter and fisher pricing is simply based on the production level, the volume that's there, and the scarcity of the product. So in the winter time, there isn't as much inland fish available that's available through the FFMC or through other providers, so that the price of fish, the price that the purchaser is willing to pay, whether it be through restaurants or whether through wholesalers or distributors, they're willing to pay more for that product because of its a shortage of supply for that product. So then compared to the summer months. Thank you.
Merci for that. So I'm understanding then that this is totally separate from the FFMC, this new plant. Is that what you're saying? And if so, what markets are there that this new plant is going to sell to? Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, we certainly do still work with FFMC to the, as I said, they are themselves in the midst of a transition that is not one that we direct necessarily or control. But to the extent that we'd have our own plant, we would then be in a position, or the fishers who are utilizing the plant would be in a position to take their fish direct to market without going through the FFMC. So it's not that, so we still have a relationship with them, but this just gives another alternative and another option for fishers here to use the plant, and then through the plant to be able to sell to other markets other than FFMC. So that's the option that it gives, and that's where it'll be the option to have different pricing associated because you're selling to different recipients. And Mr. Chair, you asked me a second question and I forgot it, but you're in charge, so you can, I think, have as many questions as you like. So perhaps if I could just ask you to give me that second question again, please.
I think it was related to the FMCC one, or Freshwater Fish Marketing Corporation. I couldn't kind of remember what it was on the second one. Oh, sorry. Mr. Holder.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe your question was where do these markets exist, and through the research that we contracted, it indicated that Western Canada is probably the closest and the best location, given the perishable, just how perishable this product could be. We want to sell this product with the least amount of freight on it. So into Alberta or British Columbia is indicated that there's markets available there. Thank you.
Merci for that. Another one, just follow up to Emily Knockelby's questions about inviting other communities, because we still have communities around the lake that haven't been touched upon, like Klutsuke, Vechico, Katludechi First Nations. And on top of that, your willingness to train these people with the actual fishermen. I think it was when I was involved with an initiative like this back in 2001. That was what was brought up. That people would be trained with the actual fishermen. But at that time, there wasn't enough interest at that time. But hopefully there'll be a renewed interest in the fishing industry moving around. If you come around to the lake, so that one is encouraging. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions from committee? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of in anticipation of getting the new plant running, I know the department was looking into remote collection stations, which would be, kind of jointly available to all operators to, hopefully get the catch up in some of those zones that aren't being fished right now. Can I just have an update on any of that work? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll direct that one back over to Mr. Holder again, please.
Mr. Holder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so the two collection sites that we're focusing on are Yellowknife and Fort Resolution. Yellowknife spoke to that a moment ago about the work with Department of Fisheries and Oceans and finding a location here in Yellowknife. What we're looking at, so it would, when we're referring to a collection site, it would be a harbor access site associated with it, a collection site. So when a collection site would most likely be a truck, though, where a fisher could come into the harbor, offload into the truck would then ship the fish south to Hay River. And when it returned, it would bring ice for the fishers to fill their boats with, to pack fish before coming back in. The other location is in Fort Resolution, and we would like to have meetings, we intend to have meetings with Fort Resolution this spring and discuss further with them the opportunities that they may see as for harbor location in the vicinity around their community. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I was perhaps misunderstood. I was picturing something different. I know at times in the past there was essentially floating barges that were going around the lake, and perhaps that's what I thought the collection stations were, as opposed to a truck. Yeah, and I know there are a couple, the fish plant does exist in North Slave right now. But I guess, sorry, switching gears right now, we presently, or the FMMC or anyone in the NWT can't presently sell to Alberta because they've opted out. I know there was going to be some discussions with the Alberta government about, I know the entire freshwater is being blown up right now at the federal cabinet table, but assuming we get this plant operating, have we made any progress on getting a deal where we could sell to Alberta? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm going to suggest I'll start that by going over to Pam, or if I could to the Deputy Minister, please.
Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, obviously, with our new plant, or the NWT Hay River plant being CFIA approved, it opens up that option to be able to sell into Alberta. I think for us, the importance of the transition of the Freshwater Fish Marketing Association and there is the Freshwater Fishes Harvesters Association that's looking at taking this over. So we've supplied them with some funding, and we will keep the committee apprised on how that all happens. But I think we're all in transition with that. And as the minister has pointed out, so with the CFIA approval on the Hay River plant, we're able to export to Alberta or to whatever markets there that the marketing plan has identified. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup for that. Mr. Johnson, you have any follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps I just don't fully understand the nature of the Freshwater Fish Marketing Act. I know we have our Freshwater Fish Marketing Act. I guess this all just depends to see how it shakes out at the federal level. But do we anticipate any changes needed to the NWT's Freshwater Fish Marketing Act? Thank you.
Minister?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, I want to turn it over to the Deputy Minister. To be quite frank, I also would say this, it is complicated. It's complicated. There's different jurisdictions interacting with one another. Even just, responsibility for the lake itself being with DFO, but then, some of the infrastructure starts to involve the Department of NWT. Yeah, so I acknowledge it's not the easiest area to navigate, and we are trying to revitalize the industry at a time where even at the federal level there's a significant transition potentially happening. Continue to work with Freshwater Fish Association, continuing to work with the Freshwater Fishers Harvesters Association. So there's a lot of different groups and players here that we really are, not only trying to do our best to work with, but I believe making good on that effort. So. That said, with respect to where we are at in the sort of the technical terms, the legalities, if I could, I'll take it over to Deputy Minister, please.
Deputy Minister?
Thank you. Yes, further to that, I think what we can say is that, yes, if the if the Act disappears federally or changes, we'll have to assess where there are gaps or what we might need to replace it with. It could be, and more than likely would be, a new piece of legislation for the Northwest Territories. So the department is looking at, what other jurisdictions have done. Newfoundland, for example, they've got, a benefits piece worked into their legislation. So I think it's far too early for us to tell. That being said, we are starting to do the initial scoping as a legislative initiative within ITI. So more to come on that, and it will have to dovetail with what the future of FFMC and the Act really is. Thank you.
Merci for that. Ms. Cleveland?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I hear from the minister and understand that there's a lot of kind of shifting happening at the federal level as well in response to MLA Johnson's question there. And I guess maybe to be more specific, I'd like to better understand ITI's role within the Freshwater Fish Marketing Corporations Act. And I'm wondering what role ITI plays in restricting FFMC, oh my gosh, we got to stop with that acronym, the Freshwater Fish Marketing Corporation's export dealers licenses, and maybe how specifically that might change in this revitalization plan. Thank you.
Merci for that. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, as I said earlier, so there is a representative at the FFMC from the Northwest Territories that sits on their board. But as with any other, entity that's, it's a Crown Corporation under federal legislation. So although we have a representative there and we are a member and benefit, have our fishers benefit from that structure, we don't otherwise control, and we couldn't control what is being done at an arm's length Crown Corporation. So that's it. Yeah, there's, representation there to presumably represent the interests of fishers in the Northwest Territories. But as a government, we wouldn't reach into the Crown Corporation from a federal Crown Corporation and tell them that they had to do one thing or another. So in terms of saying, you have to issue a license or not issue a license or issue a certain number of licenses, that is run by them, which may be one of the arguments in favor of saying, with the CFIA certified plant and the greater capacity within the Tucho fishers as they manage that plant to be able to get the ability for the exception, the processing exception, or the export license exception, well then they have that capacity, and then we have that new market through them for Northwest Territories fishers. But as far as changing what FFMC does or how they do it, then we would, again, leave it. That's not something we can do. It's not a barrier, though, in our view, to the work that's happening to revitalize the industry. Hopefully with the fish plant being built, hopefully then also eventually with more collection stations available, there are more fishers because there are more routes by which to access the markets, which also will hopefully include higher prices and better prices for them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci for that. Ms. Knockleby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything, but so it's my understanding with the way the business plan is that the fishers can only see a increased return to them if the plant is operating at a certain capacity or has a certain amount of production through it. And it doesn't sound like we're going to make that. So when will we actually see the fishers seeing more money for their fish if we've created a plant that we need to fill and feed, and yet we don't have the supports in place to keep the production up at high enough? So can the minister speak a little bit to that? Thank you.
Merci. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, it's not necessarily the intent, and I think I understand that concern that if there's not enough volume going into the plant's not making back its capital costs. So, again, having the benefit of having the government taking the lead on the strategy means that we're able to take on some of that risk for the fishing industry. And we don't necessarily need to then wait before being able to maximize the profit that we're hoping to see. There is still work happening this year with the Tucho in order to finalize their business plan. And by doing, as they do that work, we'll be in a better position to say, just how quickly, what different markets would be targeted first, and therefore what prices might go to. So, there wouldn't be, in a nutshell, Mr. Chair, not needing to wait for X, Y, or Z volume, but I'm not necessarily able to tell you today what the price will be because, again, not knowing right this moment what the final business plan will look like, and that will depend a bit on, that'll be coming over the next year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Minister. Committee, I'd like to thank you all very much for your questions. I think we're all hungry for fish and chips now. And I'd like to thank the Minister and her staff for appearing before us today. This concludes the public portion of our meeting. We'll wait till we're off the air. Merci.